Hello teacher, I'm Sofía Seketa and this is my video essay for the final. I want to talk about religion and spirituality and the role of humankind between the eras of Enlightenment, Neoclassicism and Romanticism. So I'm going to start with the Enlightenment era, where the main theory that separated the absolute power from the church was the heliocentric versus the geocentric theory. Geocentric theory was the theory that church told us where everything was revolving around the earth was the center of the universe. But with the heliocentric theory discovered by Galileo Galilei and some others in his time, it was like the sun was in the center of the universe, and everything, all the planets were revolving around it. So we weren't as a species and as a planet in the center of the universe, quite literally. We were taken out of the spotlight. And well, that was the first thing that told us that the church wasn't right about what they were saying, and that, well, there was another thing to explaining things that was more accurate, and that was with Newton and the new science, the new scientific method, where we could observe, hypothesize, and then prove what we saw all around us, all the phenomena around us in the physical world. So how this applied into humankind? Well, the Neoclassicism had then the ideals of order, of logic, and this taken into the human personality, we could say. They were represented as restraint, as accuracy, as correctness, decorum. Neoclassicism as a literature movement was against these Enlightenment ideas of men who was fundamentally good and had this infinite potential of spiritual and intellectual growth. Not at all. For the Neoclassicism, taken out of this spotlight, they saw man as an imperfect being, sinful, and whose potential was actually limited, because we could see the limit all around us. We could see the limit in physics. So the emphasis was on order and reason. And everything that had to do with conservatism. The art was actually pragmatic. It should be useful. It had to have a use for something, for mankind, to help mankind to evolve. Alexander Pope, in his Ode to Solitude, tells us how should we live life, how a man should behave, to be kind and gentle with nature, to have a modest pursuit of enjoying small pleasures in life, as that would be the maximum a human being could achieve without getting corrupted. I believe that for him, a simple kind of life is a spiritual and well-balanced life. The ideas of God and the universe no longer belonged exclusively to the church. The universe and their mysteries could be explained by following a method and mathematics, instead of religious fairy tales that could not be proven unless you were dead. So as reason, logic, and the new science were getting installed like the new kind of religion. which sometimes it follows us till today. Who doesn't believe that science can explain almost anything? It was acceptable to recreate a mankind that had these characteristics of order and reason. The focus is not in God and the afterlife, but man and his life on earth. How could we serve earth, and how could explain it in our own rules, under the earth and physics rules, not longer God rules? Paradoxically, the heliocentric theory took the earth and the humans out of the spotlight, like we were saying. Maybe we should say that the church was out of the spotlight, and put the man under the shadow of the divine. The man was this satire that God created, and reason, and a satire of himself most of the time. So reason and modesty were the only paths to a heavenly understanding, which will create a contrast with romanticism, when feelings weren't repressed but raised. We could never be as good as the divine, and this mask of well-behaviorism was starting to fall off. The comedy of manners, this type of satire, is an example of it, where people actually have hidden purposes, and most of the time they're selfish purposes, and it's not exactly what they're showing up in society. Actually, the battle of churches between the Anglicans and the Catholics is, for example, of how much the point of view about religion changed. Henry VIII dared to create the divorce. He divided what God united in holiness. He was highlighting how important life on earth was with his own church, the Anglican Church. He created it. Well, obviously, he had the tools to create it. He was the king, and as king, he ruled. His rules were laws. It wasn't a nice time to be an absurd, blind type of person with these religious beliefs, these blind religious beliefs, like in the case of Catholics. Alexander the Pope was a hidden Catholic, and Jonathan Swift his satire, A Modest Proposal, calls out this persecution when he says they should eat Catholic babies to reduce famine and also reduce the amount of Catholic people in the world. If we didn't know this story was a satire, it would be quite a disturbing reasoning. But through history anyway, we have known that reality is scarier than fiction, because Jewish people have been persecuted for their beliefs all this time. The Enlightenment age changed the worldview about what is truly divine and what isn't. Reason made people to question themselves about the origin of these preconceived ideas that were never disputed. In this case also, not just the church ideas, but this superiority that the upper classes, including the clergy, maintained and used as an excuse for their unfair actions against the common people, which led to the French Revolution, where people took their destiny in their hands and no longer more in the hands of these self-portrayed divine and wicked rulers. With the French Revolution, mankind was in the spotlight as a whole, as a community, and nobody represented the divine as a direct child of God. To compare ourselves as divine was vulgar and maybe wrong some of the times. Saints gave the humankind its power, which was the power of reasoning. Final conclusions about scientific hypotheses were generalizations. It was kind of expected that human experiences derived in generalizations too. To try to stand out wasn't modest, and individual truth was superficial to the age of reason. And once again, the view changed. Romanticism put human feelings and individual thoughts in focus. The Romantics found the source of poetry in the particular experiences, and sincerity was a criterion to be taken in this poetry. The salient romantic traits were actually emotions and feelings, and imagination was in the spotlight, and obviously love for nature was the main inspiration. Subjectivity was also there. So human experience gained a new force again. What was holy in this age? What was the role of humans and God? What is God actually? Samuel Taylor Coleridge saw the imagination as a supreme poetic quality, quasi-divine, an almost divine creative force that made the poet a godlike being, because actually they could understand the beauty in everything. They could see beauty as God could see beauty in everything, because all the creations were perfect. And I like to see this on Blake's poem The Tiger, which is so perfect to me. I really love it, and I think that he gives the sense of religiousness and spirituality of the era, showing his imagination and trying to be emphatic maybe with God's point of view. He tries to understand God's mind and his creations, and actually that imagination and that trying to understand beauty and everything led to maybe another discovery in his poems that had to do with duality, and that God isn't exactly what has always been taught it was. It wasn't this good thing and benevolent and that only has one side or one face. He sees duality in everything. He sees duality in all of his creations, in life itself, in human experience itself, and in God itself. So everything is dual, and I think that it's the thinking that follow till today, where everything is balanced and nothing is really black or white, but actually there are amounts of gray. Okay. Thank you, teacher. Bye-bye.